Hi, everyone. Welcome to HollyShorts panel this afternoon on the state of the industry. And my name's Gregory Weinkoff. I'm with the Huffington Post. And we have 5 fine screenwriters and directors here for you who will probably be illuminating us very much on the state of the industry. I'm looking at their cards because I've just met them. But this is Peter Cornwell, whom you may know from The Haunting in Connecticut. And you're working on a new film called Mercy, if I'm correct. Yeah. And then Rodo Salvages, correct? Good. The Evil Dead remake, if anyone has seen it. Awesome. Very good. He wrote this. Jaime Linden of We Are Marshall. There seems to be like a Florida contingent sort of going on here. I'm noticing. Kyle Alvarez and El Felipe Cassius. You go by Cassius as well, or just Felipe? Sure. Okay. Very good. So please leap in at your discretion and also at your own comfort and convenience. For basically, I'd like to start off with what I think a lot of people will be interested in. What got you into doing this? Anyone like to start?
What was the question?
What got you into cinema?
Pretty much the same thing that's got everyone in the seats here today. Love movies. All different aspects of movies, and currently I'm writing them. And yeah, there's no other way to answer that. Same reason you guys got into or sitting here. We love movies, yeah?
Oh, wait, let me elaborate before we go forward. There's usually a question I find from attending Q&As and panels of, like, there's some secret key or a magic wand that gets you through the door from doing it at home or doing YouTube to, like, really being a part of the industry as all of you are. So I think that might be a question that we could, embellish on for everyone.
I can answer that with an analogy I was given before I got my first movie done, and that was, you can imagine like a big wall or a mountain, and you're trying to climb it, and you keep smashing your head against the wall, keep smashing your head, and then one day it cracks, it slips open, and you slip in, and then it closes up right behind you, and it's just, you're there, and oh my God, how did that happen? 10 years, everyone thinks it was an overnight success. That analogy as well, it doesn't exist. The magic key is the cliche of hard work, and opportunity is timing and hard work. It's cliche because cliches are true. I don't know if there's a magic key or a magic door.
Well, I didn't mean to give away like a shortcut, but perseverance, we're definitely looking for that.
Absolutely, perseverance. And my personal analogy is, I always think about it like all the steps that I've been through as plateaus. Like you're at home writing, or you're home thinking about writing, and you just want to write, and it seems like such a far goal to achieve, and then you get your final draft, you start writing, and then you finish your first draft, and then you're at the plateau. Wow, I've gotten a first draft, but you're at a plateau. I got a first draft. I need another 5, 6, or 30. And you just keep doing that, and then you get to your 5th draft or whatever it is, and you're like, wow, okay, I've got a complete, great script. Now you're at that plateau. Okay, so you have one script, and you can look back and see where you've come, but there's also always another plateau. And currently mine is, I want to be produced. Check. I'd like to work with Oscar Award winners. Check. So I'm at that plateau, and guess what? There are another 5 that I can see and probably 10 that I can't, that I'm clawing towards now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got into film because I loved film and studied it and went to go study it in school and moved to LA to be working in film, and always wanted to be directing, and by proxy needed to write something so I could direct it, and then by effort of that needed to start producing so I had something to direct, and needed to edit the thing I directed because no one was there. So it was sort of, as an independent filmmaker, you kind of end up doing everything, and you're kind of responsible for everything. I was just on an hour-long deliverables conference call where I'm like trying to figure out what foreign, like exactly which kind of like high anamorphic PAL format the HDK MSR needs to be in. Like, I've needed to be responsible for every little thing, and I think that would be the key, at least from my perspective, which is like only having made pretty low budget independent films, has been just being able to be responsible. Even if you're not doing the job, you have to kind of know how to do it. And it might be the same on bigger budget things. I just haven't had that experience, and I think that's part of the key, and part of it's just actually doing it. You know, I think there's a lot of, it's easy to talk about doing it, and it's, I don't know, I think it's kind of how he put it, like I'm in a constant state of satisfaction and dissatisfaction. You know, you kind of, it's like I feel like I finished my first film, so I thought my second one was going to be easier to make, especially because my first one did well. But my second film was twice as hard to get made, and I had to make it for half the money. So I mean, it's just one of those things where I don't. For me, I've certainly had friends who've made films, and then they're like up in the studios and doing big budget things. For me, it's always been a process of doing it as much on my own as possible has been the only way to sort of, I've been able to do it the right way. So now I just have my head down and just doing things the way that makes sense to me, and not really worrying about like breaking through a ceiling of bigger budgets or studio films or anything like that. Like or TV, like if it happens, great. But I've learned that the best versions of that are the ones that just kind of come naturally, as opposed to the ones you hunt. So for me, I'm just hunting my next film as opposed to trying to get a big job or anything like that.
Cool. Thank you. Jamie?
I'm from Florida, like everyone else here on this panel, I guess. And
He's from Australia. Australia is known as the other Florida. Right. Yeah.
I moved out to LA after I graduated college because I had Price is Right tickets, actually. And
Oh, this is a great story. Yes.
yeah, and then I won on Price is Right, and took the money that I won to decide to stay here for as long as I could. And I got a job as a assistant at a production company, which I got fired from, and then I got a job as another assistant at another production company, which I got fired from also. And then while I'd been doing that, I was doing that for about 2 years, I decided, you know, I read a lot of good scripts, but I read a lot of mediocre to bad scripts as well. And I thought, that are set up at studios, you know, that are actually paid and sometimes produced. And I thought, I can do this. I can write a mediocre to bad script myself. So since I'd gotten fired, I had some time on my hands, and I was on unemployment. And I wrote a script and got a manager off of that, and my manager got me an agent, and then we sold it to Warner Brothers. And that movie didn't get made, but we got a blind deal that came out of that, and the blind deal became We Are Marshall. And suddenly I was a working screenwriter, and it quite literally happened overnight. And then that was about 9 years ago, and I've been writing in and occasionally out of the studio system ever since.
Cool. Thank you. Rodo?
Well, hello. First of all, please excuse my English. I was born in Uruguay. I've been here for 6 months, so it's kind of sloppy. Why I started doing this, I always want to be a musician, play guitar. I want to be a rock star, and that wouldn't happen. So I started shooting my own music videos with a friend with whom I'm working today, and then it all went down from there. Left the guitar aside and went on to shoot things. And we started working here in Hollywood. It was pretty weird because it wasn't a plan for us at all. I don't know if anybody knows where Uruguay actually is. But South America. It's a very small, tiny country, 3 million people in between Brazil and Argentina. And we lived all of our lives there, and trying to make movies there is very difficult. We only make like 2 movies a year, the whole country, and very low budget independent movies. So we were working doing commercials, doing short films, music videos, and trying to eventually make movies. But that was like a very far-fetched dream. It was almost impossible. So our goals were really like short-term, like just make a short film. That was a goal, and that was success for us, like getting a short film made. And always wanting to make feature films and writing scripts that never got anywhere. And eventually, 4 years ago, we made a short film called Panic Attack. We uploaded it to YouTube, which was the only goal for us. Like, let's put it out there and see if someone likes it. And it got like 6 million views in a week, and we started getting emails from Hollywood. We came here we started meeting with people like CAA, WME. We didn't know what an agency was, nothing. So, and we ended up meeting Sam Raimi, and he gave us a chance to do Evil Dead, the remake, and we did. So, coming here wasn't a plan at all. It was just coincidence. So, if I look back and then trying to find a pattern or that magic trick to getting here, I don't know what it is. I just know that you gotta do what you do because you want to do it and not think about anything else. We never thought about money or having a script produced. I mean, never. We were only trying to, shoot something next week, and that was it, like little steps. And eventually, things happen. I don't know. I think it's just love what you do and do it the best you can. Maybe something happens, maybe not, but you got to do your part. And then there's another part like destiny or whatever it is. So be ready when that opportunity shows up, and that's what happened. But I don't think there's no magic there. I don't know.
Very good. Before we move on to Peter, I want to shoehorn in a quick anecdote here. I used to live across Silver Lake from Sam Raimi many years ago, before Spider-Man and all that. And a friend of mine was a reader at the time, who was my roommate. Went over to Sam's house for a party, and Sam was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And Sam was a very jolly, good-natured guy. And he goes, "Oh, I want to make movies." He goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, I'm reading." And he goes, "Well, why?" he goes, "If you want to make movies, you have to make movies." And that really seemed to be the philosophy that drove Sam from obscurity in Michigan and friends and a Super 8 camera and some gore effects to, being one of the A-list directors of, Hollywood. So yeah, it's a valuable philosophy. Peter.
So what was the original question again?
Oh, well, just what broke you into the industry? Putting it in as few words as possible.
Well, my interest in films really comes from, just as a film fan, there was a kind of film I wanted to see that people weren't really making. And so I just wanted to make that kind of film that I was a fan of, that I wasn't seeing. And so that's where my short film, Ward 13, came from. It was this stop-motion animated film that I took a number of years to make. And it's still actually not up on YouTube because I'm still selling it to TV channels, believe it or not, 10 years later. The Shorts channel, I'm doing a deal with them right now. Amazingly, but I sold it like 5 times to France and stuff. Anyway, that's what gave me representation over here. And it was basically on the strength of that it's kind of an action movie, but it's about this guy trying to break out of hospital, and it's sort of got horror elements to it. So it's very hard to do an action movie on a low budget, so I gravitated towards looking at horror stuff. And it's about kind of having something to show people, I think, is huge. And actually, in my case, having a short film was kind of. I remember when I first came out, after meeting my manager, when I first came out the first time, he'd lined up 54 meetings with different producers, and partly because it was a short film and they had no excuse not to watch it, they'd send it to him and say, "Can you watch this film?" And if they hadn't seen it, they'd come on, it's only 15 minutes. And whereas a feature film, if you did some independent feature film, they'd probably say, "Oh, you have a legitimate excuse not to watch a 90-minute film," And also, I think that people, if you're working on no money, if you can be better off putting all that your limited time and resources and money into making one really kick-ass short film versus diluting that amount over a 90-minute feature film, unless it's like you've got a really great drama that you can just shoot with a camera and really simple lighting and stuff. Because if your feature film isn't that great, they'll probably only watch the first 10 minutes anyway. So I've heard people say, "Oh, you got to make a feature so you can sell it," but most feature films don't sell anyway. They rarely make their money back. So I think if you're really trying to break in and teach yourself, also in a short film, it could be a better way to learn because you're not committing to such a big thing. You can try things and experiment, and it's not such a commitment. And you're going to go through favors, and you're not going to burn up every favor on a short film like you would if you did a zero-budget feature film. You know what I mean?
How did that connect to The Haunting in Connecticut? What launched you into that one?
Well, I came out and did a lot of meetings, and they sent me a bunch of scripts. And there was this other film with Warner Brothers. I was going to do that with David Heyman, And
He makes a few little movies like the Harry Potter films.
right, well, he was mostly, I mean, he was. There was just a lot of politics and stuff. When you're doing a big studio thing, there's any number of things that can happen, and I think there's a lot to be said for just going out and shooting your own film. It's one of the reasons my second film is with Blumhouse, because you don't have to jump through as many hoops. You can just, I mean, I was attached to a whole bunch of things that just never seemed to happen, and there was a film with Lionsgate, and I was waiting around for so long. It would have been super awesome, but just had a sort of mind-bending ending, and the powers that be felt a little nervous, and who knows, maybe they were right. I'm not a marketing guy. I just thought it was a good script, and so I spent all that time waiting around. So I just jumped on this other film. But the lower budget films, they're easy to get funded and easier. You have kind of less. You have less control in that you don't have as much money to do what you want, but you have more control in that there's less people telling you what to do. You know, like a buddy of mine did a big studio film, and one day this new cast member turned up. Who's this? Oh, he's this new character that we wrote last night. And he was in the movie. I won't tell you what film it was, but and it's like, oh, okay. And a big part of sometimes working on these big studio films is just shutting up and rolling with the punches and being a good little soldier, you know. Whereas I think the lower budget films, you can have more input, you know. Anyway.
Very good. Thank you all. I'm going to do this a little bit of an unorthodox way here, because we're here for 90 minutes, and some of you may have questions after each major question that I ask them. So does anybody want to speak about anything we've covered so far before we proceed? No? Yes? Anybody? Feel free. Oh. Well, here's to all of us. Here's to HollyShorts. Oh, really? I mean, this is my first year at this festival, and I've known Theo, who's one of the founders, but I love what they're doing. You know, they're genuinely getting everybody engaged in the process, and it's not exclusive, but it is high quality, you know, which is great. Everyone's encouraged to do their best. Yes. Oh wait, I have to bring you a microphone so that you can be recorded as this.
Some of you are writers, and some are directors, and some are both. Can each of you go through and give us your thoughts on the beautiful, tortured thing that is the writer-director relationship?
Really? Please.
Well, I mean, I can only speak of it that I guess I have that relationship with myself. You know, actually, that's not true. I'm for the first time I'm making a film that's based on someone else's script. I don't know. For me, I feel like there's always a part of a writer that's. I think they overlap a lot more than people like to imagine. You know, I think that we sort of think the script is written and then it gets made, but the actual like process of screenwriting is for me it's sort of like a fractured art, because it's much more about like an actual screenplay itself. So there's some writers out there that write screenplays that read so well where you're almost like, I don't even need to see the film get made. For the most part, scripts are they're just structure. And I think that the best ones are the ones that are written in a way that a director can come in and put himself into it in a lot of ways. Or at least those are the ones I respond to that I didn't write. But even when I write, you know, a huge part of when I start directing is, okay, I need to move away from what I imagined it being as a writer. And I feel like that's my relationship when I'm directing something I didn't write, which is it has to at some point, just like when you get into editing, at some point you have to step away from the script and even forget, you know, really at the end of the day, especially if it's a low-budget film, all you have is what you have in front of you that day and what you can do with that. But it's even the same in the studio films. If a character shows up and suddenly, okay, you have to add him to the film, like it's about knowing that it's about making sure you can let go. But also remember, I think if there's maybe it's Fincher said this, that like what making a film is like when you read a script you love, the first time you read it, you get so excited. And the whole process of making the film is it that what you loved about that kind of being stripped away from it by just money, casting, the powers that be, shoot days, everything. He's like, but the way to make the best film is to try to hold on to what that original spark was. So whether I wrote something or not, or I've adapted something or not, I always try to remind myself, even when I go into directing, even when I go into editing, am I staying true to that original thing? Because it surprises me so many times that my friends that have made films they're not happy with, I think it's because they lost sight of that, you know, all the other problems around it. took place. So that doesn't directly answer, but I think it's kind of in tune with what you were asking.
Good point. I've only written and directed shorts. I've yet to direct a feature that I've written. So because of that, I tend to take very much to heart the art of letting go. So I craft the script as well as I can possibly craft it so that when the director does get it, he's sparked immediately, and maybe there's less room for wiggle because I want it to be, for everyone who reads it, like, boom, I could see it straight away. Awesome. I think scripts that I have written or will write that I'll direct, it probably needs to be less of that because I'm writing it for myself to direct as my own vehicle. So even if, whatever sparked it the day I wrote it, when I direct it, I allow myself more leeway. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but yeah, I think if you're writing, directing, you can probably have a lot more freedom with what you're writing. It doesn't have to be set in stone. Not that even things that get set in stone still get spun, but Jamie probably has the handle on this one, I think.
Well, as a writer, I love working with directors. I much prefer working with the director as quickly as possible in the development process because it saves time. You whenever you take a job, you're going to get notes from somebody. So regardless of how much I may or may not agree with the director, my job as the writer is to put on the page what he's going to shoot and put on the screen. So and I've had really good. I've been really fortunate in that I've on the movies that have gotten made, I've stayed involved all the way through. So I haven't had that situation which happens really frequently in Hollywood, which is you write something and then somebody else comes in and changes it for the better or for worse. I've been, complicit in the good ones and the bad ones all the way through. And then as a director, I directed this little movie a couple years ago, and I wrote it for myself. And I personally have no real interest in directing something that I didn't write. I mean, I only wanted to direct as an extension of writing. We did a movie that was pretty much almost completely improvisational, and that we filmed chronologically so that the actors could change things as they went along. And if I didn't direct that myself, I felt like we wouldn't quite have that same process. So, but as a writer, I mean, I a good relationship with the director is paramount to, I think, the movie working.
I work with my friend and partner Fede, who directed Evil Dead. So we work together all the time. We write together. He goes and direct. I think eventually when we let me get this straight. Sometimes, a lot of times we disagree. It's hard to, we're two different people. It's hard to have the same vision. But in the end, I think the movies is the directors owns the movie. That's what I think. Because he's going to spend 2 years working on that, and you're going to be doing something else. So what I learned working with him is that we eventually get to a point where we are both right about something, about the way the story could go. It works either way. But my job is to make him, the director, love the story and love the movie. Sometimes he can agree with me and think, yeah, that's perfect. That works. That character should be doing that. That scene should be like that. But I don't feel it. I don't love it. And if that happens, we go on and continue working because he's going to be the guy on set doing that. He's going to be, once we have like a final draft, I'm going to go on and start writing something else. And it's going to be a year and a half with that movie, taking care of every single detail. So I think it's very important that the director loves the story and loves every single bit of the story. But I think it's important for the writer to help that happen.
I like that. Yeah. I think it's really important to work with the writer really closely because he knows the story better than depending on. In my case, I came along to like Haunting in Connecticut. They'd already been working on the script for 2 years before I came on board. So you'd be in meetings and producers and people would make suggestions, and then maybe if the writer wasn't around, then I'd talk to the writer and he'd go, "Oh yeah, we tried that, a year ago, and but it doesn't work for that reason, And so I found that the writers, there were actually two writers, Adam Simon and Tim Metcalf, and they just knew it so inside out that it was really good working with them because every time I came up with an idea, you'd run it by them and they'd sort of filter it through the story logic. It had kind of a complicated backstory that I didn't want to mess with too much. And in hindsight, it was pretty amazing that the story was the backstory was so complicated, but people really understood it at the end of the film. About films in the future, I think one of the things I really want to make sure I do, in the meantime, I've started writing some of my own scripts. I was writing scripts before, but they weren't very good. Now I'm getting better as a writer, and I want to make sure that when I'm directing a film next time, you make it your own, make it as if you've written it yourself. You want to sort of own every moment and sort of see inside. I think when you're writing your own script, you're sort of seeing the skeleton a little more than when you're just coming on board someone else's script. And I think it's really important to sort of really treat it as if you wrote it yourself and sort of look at it that way. Anyway.
Great answers. Thanks, guys.
Anyone before we move on? Yeah, we have another one. All right. Hello, everyone. How are you today?
Since you were asked sort of an artistic, creative process question, I'm going to ask more of a business question. As filmmakers, in lieu of the very changed economy of films, especially independent films, and I think everyone's well aware that to even stay afloat and sell films at an economical level, it's challenging, and it seems to be television is where the money's at these days. How are you all doing? What are you doing to survive? And are you leveraging any kind of new opportunities that exist through internet and creative media?
Well, I'm surviving on the salary of my movie at the moment. I got a few other things brewing. You kind of want to keep making films, but I'm doing well enough that I don't have to just take a film just for the money, which I think is a good place to be, because I think if you come and make a film that you're not really happy about doing just for the money, it could end up being terrible, and then that could actually jeopardize your long-term earnings potential, But how about you?
Our movie came out a couple of months ago, and then it did really well. So we got offered a lot of things from the studios, and we were thinking exactly what he was saying, like don't do this for the money, don't be tempted, because you're going to spend a lot of time with the project, and you better love it. You better really love it, because if you spend it, after 2 years, you're going to hate it if you don't really love it. So we waited for like 2 or 3 months to see if something that we really loved came up, and we ended up selling our own pitch. We just thought, okay, we got a lot of ideas in line. Let's just which one is the one that we think fits most for the moment and for us now. We sold it, and now we're writing a screenplay. So I think if things don't come, you can create them yourselves. There's always when you've made a movie, doors are open, so people are going to listen to you. If they think your idea is cool, things are going to happen.
For me, even over the last 9 years, you probably agree with this too, the business is bifurcating so clearly that it's becoming, there's big studio movies, and the studios are only making larger and larger and larger movies, and then there's the independent world, which there's sort of this glut of films, and everybody's struggling for distribution and release, and VOD is still new, and people are trying to figure out how to monetize, independent film in a way that makes sense. I mean, on the one I directed, we spent about $4 million. I don't know why we spent that much money, because we could have done it for $800,000, but it was there, so we took it, and it made, we had a pretty traditional distribution deal, but it was a tiny movie, and the marketing budget was under $1 million, and there's a pretty direct correlation with how much the marketing budget is and how much the movie is going to make in theatrical. If the marketing budget is under $1 million, 95% of the time the movie is going to end up grossing under $1 million, regardless of quality. And that's true, 5 million and 10 million. And, I've worked on big studio movies that have opened to 35 million, and the quality wasn't particularly great, but the ad buys are there, and that's what matters opening weekend. So it's a strange time, it seems like, for independent. Kyle's about to release his movie COG, and is going through this right now.
I'll sort of respond to because we have very small marketing. Focus is releasing the film, but it's a very small marketing budget, and so it's I think even much smaller than 10 Years got, and I think that it's also, that's why we're doing a day and date release. It's going in 15 cities, and it's going on VOD at the same time, and it's getting a release it's a much smaller movie than Only God Forgives, but it's not getting too different of a release, minus the marketing dollars. So in a lot of ways, the VOD is the equalizer, but the marketing money is the variable. That's the thing there that still determines the difference. Having said that, with what you're talking about, like sort of how do you make money, how do you survive? For me, I never once stepped into film hoping to make money. I mean, that's the truth. I think we talk about it more in this industry than other art forms because there are ways to make money in it. If I make money at some point in my life, I'll be happy. But if I still just end up meeting my rent and mortgage and cell phone bill and can feed myself, I'm content. And that's taken different forms throughout my last, I've been in LA for 7 years. I've been making films for 5. I was a personal assistant before that. And, I've taken editing jobs. I've taken, jobs. The trick is to try to find work that doesn't necessarily disrupt the work you're doing in a film. It's tricky. And for some people, that's a service job. That's being a waiter or something. For everyone's sort of different. But, for me, I've never... my films, I've never made money on my movies. Not necessarily because, I guess if they do well, maybe I could afford to, but I've never taken a rate. I've always paid myself on my films. That's the thing that I always encourage people to do. I've paid myself the minimum I need to cover my rent and living expenses, because what's happened to a lot of my friends is they go and they shoot a film. They take, a month off work or whatever. And then they got to go right back to work, and then a year and a half or 2 years pass and they haven't even finished the edit of their film. And so it's great that you went and shot this feature, but you didn't. So you've got to make sure that's part of the film. That's part of the budget of the film. That's part of what the film needs in order to get finished. And so not overpaying yourself, but not paying yourself, I think, is an important part of the budget. And it's because you're the person that's going to be on it, especially if you're also producing it, maybe also editing it, and you're also a marketing person when it comes to film festivals. But the film festival thing takes a whole year. I mean, we premiered at Sundance in January. The film's coming out now, but we haven't even started selling it internationally. So I still have 5 or 6. I've been in. Will have been in probably over 20 cities in less than 6 months, and so that's all around the world, and that's exciting. But that's also a year of my life without any pay or any income or anything. So it's a tricky thing, and it's just about keeping your living. For me, I think as an independent filmmaker, it's about keeping your living expenses low, and so that you're never in a place where you need to do a film. For me, I'm rambling a bit, but the thing is, it's about deciding what's sacred to you. If what's sacred to you is, for me, it's my credits as a director. So I'd be happy to go write something someone made, and I've had some scripts optioned that then I've taken my name off, and some other things like that. But for me, it's I think that the trick is to know what's sacred. So for me, as a feature director, I have noticed I will never go onto a feature directing job because I need the money for it. And I've certainly not gone in and pitched on movies or passed on films quite often that certainly would have paid well, but I just didn't want that on my CV, you know?
Yeah, I don't have the burning answer, but particularly we just said I was gonna say, I guess I can slightly elaborate. When you're the director, it's probably a lot more important that you have your name put on something that you value, and you can, or you need to, or you will take time between projects until you get what you want and find a way to pay yourself. I don't know how that's going to be, but if you're writing it, there is a line between commerce and art, and I think directors are more apt to be on the art side of that line, and I think well, working writers anyway are definitely on the other side of that line, and that's where I'm at right now, embracing just work. I do know where that line is, and yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, guys.
Anyway, okay. I'm going to ask him something, and then I'll come over here. Kind of a baseball metaphor. I don't know a lot about baseball, but it's good for metaphors. It seems like there aren't a lot of base hits anymore in the film industry. Everything is kind of like The Hobbit, $1 billion. Iron Man 3, $1 billion. I went to a screenwriting panel a couple of years ago, Bruce, Joel, Rubin, a bunch of veterans, and everybody said, write for television. They said, the great stuff is going on to HBO and Showtime and these series, and if you want to work in writing, that's where the best writers are getting their jobs right now. But so I'm kind of curious, just your perceptions, and I'm sure they're all varying. Like, what's going on in the industry? Because we have like Lucas and Spielberg and titans like that saying, we're going to go bankrupt if we have like 6 bombs, you know, and that's a pretty big statement to make about an industry that's making these massive films. But is there a way in where we're going to be making like, you know, $40 million Sandra Bullock films again, or Lasse Hallström gets to direct again, and so forth? Is that in the future, do you think, or are we going to stick with these massive billion-dollar films?
I think we're going to stick with the massive films. I think for now that's the model that works. I think it's really easy, and I'll be brief because I know I just spoke, but I think it's really easy to look at like a movie people consider a flop and not realize that the money that a studio makes off of a franchise film, the actual like box office is only one piece of all the money they're making on it. There's so many ancillary costs, whether it's toys and video and DVD and marketing. There's so many tie-ins. There's so many things that you wouldn't be able to get. Like we have to start. Film studios used to not be how we consider big corporations, and now they are. That doesn't mean they're not going to occasionally make a good film here or there, but the mentality is different. What I do think it does is it opens up a desire, and I think that market is becoming the VOD market, which is there still will be a desire for low and mid-range content. And yes, people are saying, oh, TV is all their greatest work, but guess what? Now everyone's going to TV. TV used to be where actors were discovered. Now all the big-name actors are going to TV. And TV used to be where directors could work their craft and work their way up. Now everyone, big-name level directors want TV jobs. So it's just as hard to get. I would love to get TV jobs, but it's just as competitive as anything in features is now because great work is happening there. And so, I don't know, at the end of the day, for me, the only lesson I've ever learned is just create your own content, create it in a way that you think you can actually get it made, and if that leads to, and just know you're always going to make another thing. So if that one doesn't maybe hit as much as you would want it to, then you move on to the next one. I mean, I really believe in creating content that you can actually get made.
In my experience, there are still studios that are interested in hitting doubles, singles and doubles. I'm writing a movie for Paramount right now with myself to direct called Flight Before Christmas, which is, you know, it was all decided in advance. It's an $8 to $10 million movie, budget-wise, and marketing would be about 25 to 30. And Paramount has a reputation as somebody that is only hitting home runs, but even they have found that they need to fill out their slate, you know, just to justify the enormous overhead that it costs to run a studio. You know, Disney, for instance, is only hitting home runs right now, but and you know, they have Pixar and they have Lucasfilm now, but as far as their product, their output, they're down to like 8 to 12 movies a year, you know, and for a studio like Paramount or Warner Brothers, who's still making the most movies. I mean, Warner's is still making 20 to 22 movies a year. Every one of them just can't be these $200 million tentpoles. But like Kyle said, the $200 million tentpoles with ancillary costs, and especially international now, because those are the movies that are traveling. You know, the big, huge budgets, special effects-driven movies, you know, with China and all of these emerging marketplaces. I mean, those do much, much better overseas than a Sandra Bullock, you know, $40 million rom-com. But people are, you know, what was that movie that she just did?
Oh, wait, I'm not summoning more Sandra Bullock films. It's okay at the level that they're at right now, just as an example.
But the Heat's a great business model. I mean, every studio would want a Heat. You know, that cost $50 million and made
That's Fox, right?
150.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are still studios that are interested in hitting singles and doubles. There are just less of them, and the home runs is where the enormous income, you know, comes. So, but Haunting in Connecticut is a great example, right?
What was the budget for that? Just offhand.
It was like 11.
Oh wow!
But
okay.
there's a lot of films around 11. I think, particularly horror films. I think The Conjuring was the exception. It was 20 million. And I was kind of jealous because they got to build the whole house how they wanted it, with big rooms and the gaps between the walls and stuff. For my film, we had to find a house, and we built a couple of pieces. But yeah, but I was really happy that Conjuring did so well, because they actually spent $20 million on a film, and it was the biggest horror film in a long time. Versus pretty much all the other horror films right now are like $2.5 million. You know, everyone's doing the Blumhouse model, of which I'm actually done one. I'm in post-production now on the $2.5 million film. But I think you do spend a bit more money, and it just gives you more of a safety net. That you're less likely to go off the rails, and you can do stuff that's more original when you get to build your own house. You know, yeah. Well, I was going to say that from what I could tell, one of the things about that model is, if it costs $2.5 million, then they'll test it, and if it does well in the preview testings, they kind of already know if audiences are going to like it based on the test screenings, and then they might even put some more money into it and do some more days shoots. Like I think on The Purge, they tested badly, then they recut it, then it tested well, and they put in a whole bunch more money and shot. Most of the coolest stuff in the trailer came from the extra reshoot stuff, apparently, which is really cool and good on them. But then they spend $20 million on the marketing, and so that way it only, you know, if it makes, then I mean half the money goes to the cinema, right? Approximately.
Ish, yeah.
Yeah, and so then it needs to make like 60 million. Oh, it's only got to make like 50 million or something, and they're really in massive money. Versus if they make a $40 million film and then spend 20 million on the marketing, then it's got to make that much more. And apparently, those films on the 40 million is not going to look as sexy as the $200 million film. So the $200 million films have this built-in spectacle that you can get with that sort of budget, which is kind of a safety net that makes them feel happy. So they can. So there's like a gap somewhere between like 30 million and 80 million. They make very few films between that budget level. But I think after Lone Ranger and these big flops, they're going to be looking at it. Well, what's really interesting, one thing I was saying is the original Pirates of the Caribbean was only about 100 million. And then the Lone Ranger, even though it was the first one, and for the sequels they went up in budget. But for the first Lone Ranger, they might have been better making it like 100 million, and then they weren't taking the same risk. And then for the sequel, they could have gone 250 or whatever it cost. And I think Elysium was like 100 million, and I think they're going to be making more $100 million films rather than $300 million films. And I think that's where, guys that come up like us, you learn the cheaper ways of doing things when you're doing lower budget films, and you learn how to do cheap effects and stuff. And a guy like Neil Blomkamp has a background in special effects, so he knows how to get the most out of the budget. And a buddy of mine does these commercials by himself and corporate videos and stuff, but he does the most amazing effects by himself. He makes, he'll shoot it, edit it, mix it, do 3D characters in Maya, does it all himself. And And then, if he made a feature film, he could actually do that on it as well. Like I met the Spearig brothers, and they on Daybreakers, they did like 300 effects themselves. They just taught themselves on YouTube how to do compositing, and did a whole lot of sky replacements and stuff. And they said the studio didn't really notice or care, but they reckon they saved the studio about $1.2 million. And same with their first film, they did like 300 and something effects themselves. And I think that's the way it's kind of going, is people, if you can prove yourself to be efficient, I think you can get, there's going to be, and as computer stuff gets more advanced, I think there's going to be a way to make the cheaper films look more expensive and bring the cost down, and the economics will work. Anyway.
Oh, that's very good. And Geraldo's the only one who hasn't spoken yet, but this allows me to segue to the right side of our panel here regarding, and I'll come right to you then. Is horror or is genre entertainment like horror a good way, do you think, to break in because the budgets can be lower, you can find an audience immediately, people are just immediately intrigued, you may not even need a star cast in order to sell the film? How do you feel about that, both of you having directed horror?
Well, yeah, I think
having written horror, sorry.
A lot of huge directors start out with horror. Oliver Stone and Steven Spielberg.
Oh, The Hand.
Yeah.
Nobody ever. It's not in his box set, and I'd like it to be in there.
Yeah, and Sam Raimi, it's a very good platform to start from. Because yeah, you're absolutely right. You can make horror movies with little money. You don't need stars. It's easy to sell a horror movie. Like audiences right away get what it is about. So. And it's a very cinematic genre. Like the use of the camera is very important. So you can, as a director, you can really show what you got. You know what I mean? Like you pull your guns out. Like there's a lot of room to play with cameras and with effects. Like to play with audience's expectations. So I think it's a very, very good point to start as a director.
Peter, how do you feel about this?
Well, I think you got to get your juice out of a movie. I think it needs to have a certain level of intensity for people to be bothered getting in their cars and coming out and seeing it at the cinema. And horror is a great way, on a low budget, of getting some intense juice in your film. If you don't have massive production values, you have, like Sam Raimi had on Evil Dead, you have this intense gore, and you get the intensity. On the original one, it was on a shoestring budget, but it was still really intense. And I think that's something that you can get out of horror. And also I think people appreciate, a lot of people will go to a horror film on opening weekend, whereas a drama, they might wait for it on DVD. I think there's something about being in the cinema, and it just seems to be a really commercial genre. It's probably the safest genre if you're making a low-budget film. But that said, I think you still got to love it. You can't just cynically go out and make a horror film.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, coming from the Antipodean regions, too, I mean, you've got Peter Jackson in New Zealand and George Miller and, not really horror, but Mad Max is a very intense film.
Right.
They're starting off with stuff that connected with people around the world in a kind of universal way that didn't need, like, a specificity for a certain culture or a certain region.
Right.
Everyone goes, I get what that guy's doing with that car.
Right, well, and look at Peter Jackson's first film, Bad Taste.
Well, there, exactly.
It had terrible camera work, terrible acting, terrible effects and stuff, but it was an awesome film. You could see that he was a really great director from just his use of film language, and he creates this incredible suspense. He plays two characters in it himself.
I think he still does appear in all his films, yeah. Briefly.
Yeah. And I guess horror is a great way of being able to show that you can use the language of film to tell a story. I think a lot of times if you're just doing a drama, it can feel more like television, really, and you might have great performances. But I think a lot of times it's just good to be able to see, you can do clever things with the camera and stuff to help tell the story, which horror gives you a great opportunity. Like a lot of times there'll be scenes without any dialogue, and so you're telling the story visually, which is kind of what's unique about cinema.
Certainly. Thank you all. We're going to move over to the audience here. We have a new, fresh question.
Howdy. A lot of you guys are from other countries or other cities. does that affect your break-in? Like, did it give you something extra, or did it hinder or improve?
I think in my case it helped. You go into a meeting and you stand out as being, I'm the guy with the accent. How many people did I see today? Oh, there's that guy from Australia. I think it gives you some credibility, which I feel kind of bad for local LA people, because you've kind of already proved, well, because I've already proved myself of a certain level, and the fact you've come over to America sort of show you've sort of been pre-qualified to some extent. Whereas I think if you grow up in LA and you're just doing meetings, maybe if you won a bunch of awards or something, there's some reason, and they really like your short. But I think it can be a big help just from the fact you've come from overseas, I think.
Yeah, for us it helped a lot. I mean, we made the short film that got us noticed. We made it for $300. It would have been well, $300, and then Fed spent like 2 years in the computer making all the CGI. So if he would have paid himself, it would be a lot more expensive. But I think we couldn't have made that here, and the accent helped. Like when we got here and we started getting meetings, my English was a lot worse. So I was like, yeah, well, but and they were like, oh, he must be saying something really smart. And so, you know, like when they bring all these Korean directors that don't speak a word in English, they all sound like they are philosophers. You know, like and it's like, oh, so they listen a lot more. But and one funny story is they didn't know anything about us, anything about our country, nothing at all. We had a meeting with the producer that for a first project that we were working on that it ended not happening. But he introduced us to other producer on Monday Pictures. We go to the bathroom, Fede and I, and when these two guys were alone, one says to the other, like, this guy's like, where did it come from? What? Uruguay? Yeah. I mean, come on, let's give him just $50,000. That'll be it. And the other guy says, no, man, forget it. They're like, they're like Arabia or something like that. It's like they're millionaires. They have millions. They're not in it for the money. Like, forget about it. You got to put a lot of money for them to say yes. Really? Are they rich in Uruguay? Yeah, everybody's like, oil and whatnot. And the guy, and like the next morning we had an offer, and it was the biggest deal ever for a first-time director in Hollywood history. Because of that. And we, yeah, and cut to, while that was happening, we were in the bathroom, like, checking the toilet paper, like, wow, how soft it is here, man. So it really helped being from the jungle. Yeah, it was great.
Are you actively trying to put your cultures that you come from into your films, secretly or overtly, or?
In our case, you can tell that we are not from America because of the shitty dialogue in our movie, and yeah, but that's about it, I think. It was a horror movie, as he said. It's like really universal. Really, we grew up watching this movie, so it was really natural. I mean, for us.
I guess on top of that, are you, when you're writing your own scripts, and it goes across the board, using slang and things like that? Do you generally avoid that in your scripts? That's cultural specific, or are you just trying to create a universal script initially and then add that flavour in later, separating the director and writing kind of roles?
If on the scripts I'm writing, I just give all the American characters lots of Australian slang. I don't know. I think some things you think it's American and it turns out it's Australian. There's some surprising things, but I'd just show it to an American and get them to veto it, I think.
Yeah, we do the same thing. But in the end, I think dialogue, it's all about subtext. So eventually you're going to have an actor coming over and she's going to change the lines. So it doesn't really matter how cool your lines are on the paper, unless you're a Tarantino. It matters a lot, but I don't know. I think as long as the idea and the subtext is clear, then the rest you can change in. The actor is going to bring something new in it, and it's going to work.
I think I know. I think it just depends. What are you creating your content for? I think that's the important question. Are you creating it for yourself to make? Okay, well, where are you going to make? Let's say you're going to write something that you're trying to make for whatever money you can scrounge together, whether it's friends and family, Kickstarter, whatever. It's use the resources you have. Don't go write the $10 million feature that you're going to try to make for $100,000. Write the movie that uses the things that are at your disposal, and write something good around that, something you believe that you can utilize those things. I mean, that was what Robert Rodriguez was doing, when he did El Mariachi. He just was well, I have all these things. He was literally I have access to a prop severed head, so I'm going to write a scene with a severed head in it. I have props, I have, and, that's not necessarily, that's the same way how they made Mission Impossible 2, where they're we want two motorcycles to run into each other and get the story there. It's not necessarily, it's not really the best way, but it's just about utilizing what you have. And you're going to make a film that way, make it part of what you are and who you're from and where you're from. But if you're trying to write something to sell, then, if you're going to be out here in Los Angeles, then, you probably want to write, American characters that fit an age range where people make their stars that make money that way. I mean, the best example of that is, for better or worse, I don't even really know, is The Impossible. You're talking about, first of all, it was a story about a tidal wave that killed a ton of non-English, non-American people. They made a movie based on a real story that was about a Hispanic family and turned them into a bunch of white English people. So it was a weird thing. Now, at the end of the day, they were able to make a film that had so much scope and a lot of effects work in it, and really that was part of the weight and heaviness of the film. They wouldn't have been able to do that financially if they had made a movie that was maybe more authentic to the area and what had happened. So there's always a give and take, and there's always sacrifice. It's just about knowing where, and compromise. It's just about knowing where your line is for the specific material you're going to make, in terms of how much of yourself and who you are and where you're from you're going to put into it.
As far as the name thing or the accent thing, my accent comes and goes, depends on who's listening and how they hear it. But the names, I think Jamie might get Jaime once in a while, and I don't know how that works before they meet you or not. My name is Philippe. Invariably, when I'm met, people on the phone can say Felipe. When they see me, they want to say Felipe. That happens all the time, and it's kind of weird, but it's true. I don't know if that helps or hinders the meeting process. Sorry. Yeah, so I don't know about accents helping or names helping. And the writing what you know part, slang. I'm from New York, and I do tend to write stories with subtext, obviously, but I do tend to lean towards characters that I know or have met or have heard, and that almost always leans towards New York, or at least East Coast. So, yeah, I guess I try to write what I know, or the people I know, not necessarily the stories I know, because a good writer should always, feed yourself and want to tackle new material. But yeah, I guess if I was from Boston, all my guys would be wearing bee hats. But luckily, I'm not from Boston. So that doesn't get to happen at all, ever, really. And also, I think the anti-hero is easy guy to write when he's from New York. I don't know why that is, but that just happens that way. Most of my guys are very, what you, from Australia, I'm guessing, would imagine as New Yorkers. That's just how it is, because it's easy, I guess, and that's also what I know. I don't know what a guy from actually, I do know a guy from Miami would be like. Maybe not Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
Cheers.
Okay, anyone before we go on? Okay. Okay, we'll drop it in here and I'll come back. There are actually several hands. Did you want? Okay. I'm going to do here and then I'll go there, okay?
Hello. I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for coming. It's been a really illuminating panel. My name is Allison, and this is more of a personal question. I was wondering if there's a film, short film, feature film that you saw when you were a child last week that really inspired you and that you would encourage everyone in this room to see?
Like from a long time ago, like from when we were
From
kids.
when you were
or-
5, from last week, short, long, independent.
Oh, that could be
big?
another hour and a half. If I mean, legitimately, I could probably say at minimum 100 films that would have like dictated why I'm doing, what I'm doing. I mean, for me, it was like the sort of mid '90s independent film era, like when Alexander Payne and Todd Solondz were first starting. Like it basically like Welcome to the Dollhouse and Citizen Ruth are like, those are the things where I was like, I want to make that kind of, that's the kind of movie that I sort of want to be working on. But I grew up loving Hitchcock, so, and I also want to make a movie like that. I just haven't had a chance to yet.
Weirdly for me, it was Independence Day, actually. I was 14, and I don't know how I got from being a 14-year-old kid who was wired into Independence Day to writing Dear John, but somehow that ended up. But Independence Day is. I'm almost afraid to rewatch it because it's probably really. As a 14-year-old boy, it's the most amazing. It had literally everything. Fights up in the sky and aliens. Will Smith punching.
For me, it was always like movies from the 80s, like fantasy kids going into amazing worlds like The Goonies and Never-Ending Story, which is a German-American movie. Wolfgang Petersen, that movie is amazing. I think it didn't play really well here in the States. I don't know, but if you have the chance, I know if you've seen it. If you have a chance, check it out. It's amazing. Never-Ending Story. And those kind of movies were like the movies that made me like fantasy more than the real world, I think.
Yeah, I liked films like that too. I guess the film that really inspired me was seeing King Kong, the original King Kong, and Jason and the Argonauts. Because I did work experience at a effects house, and I was reading the Cinefex magazines, and I saw Ray Harryhausen did like, he was sort of laughing at these big films that had 80 guys, 100 guys doing these special effects, because he did it all by himself back in the day, and I'm thinking, maybe I could do it by myself. I didn't think that stop motion would integrate with live action like they could get away with back then, but I thought, well, what if I just make the whole world in stop motion? I can make like a big action blockbuster by myself. Basically, which is what I ended up doing. It was kind of slow, but and that's what inspired me. And then I saw Wallace and Gromit, The Wrong Trousers, and they sort of did that, and I was like, that really inspired me as well. The level of kind of expression and artistry you could get into stop motion, and I thought stop motion was really exciting as well because I still feel like it's a relatively unexplored art form. I think that there's a lot that people still haven't done in stop motion. Even though I'm in live action now, I'd still go back and do a stop motion film one day. But right, yeah, he was the well, without any computer assistance too. And Jason the Argonauts, he had this fight with 7 skeletons fighting 3 guys, and he was animating them all in real time. So we had to remember where each limb was on all 7 skeletons in the same shot. And these days you have a frame grabber so you can watch back the shot up to where it, but he had to hold it all in his head. And so no one else was doing that, and he was just so far ahead. And I think a whole generation of effects guys were inspired by Ray Harryhausen as well.
For me, it's the standards, the cliche movies, Godfather 2, and then there are directors like Kubrick and stuff like. Someone said earlier, I think you mentioned something about the difference between going to a theater and having an experience with a horror movie as opposed to a drama. Guys like Kubrick and visual directors like that, you have to see it in a theater, whereas. Like rom-coms and stuff, I don't need to see that in a theater or at all, for that matter. So I go with the standards, like, you know, Kubrick movies. If I had to narrow it down to one, like off the top of my head, maybe like Deer Hunter, which wasn't super visually impacting, but you know, just old movies, Pope of Greenwich Village, like things that are just so, I don't know what the word is, guttural. Like you just, it sucks you in. You know what I mean? And I don't know that there are too many of those at the big budget level anyway that are being made. But that's what I'm going with.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the woman in pink.
Hi, thanks. I'm sort of naive, and I've written my first script, and it's been optioned, but it's been optioned in Thank you. But in Scandinavia. So, and I have a decent-sized budget, like a small, but enough to make it. But I'm wondering, if I do it there, will I have any shot of getting it out here? Like, how are co-productions? How do you guys know anything about that?
I don't know much, but I'm gonna go out on a branch and say you have probably just as good a chance. No?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you're gonna have just as good a chance as if it were made in Vancouver or New Orleans.
But
It's
I was thinking,
2013.
when you guys talked about the marketing money, right? Like, if a studio's made it, don't they have more in with all that sort of the distribution and?
My experience is that's pretty much like the goal. That's the bullseye. The bullseye is the foreign market, which is why I need the big face and the big name, and why it's got to be a certain level. And if it's not, it's going to be a homegrown movie that that people want to make and aren't expecting to make money from. But I have a very limited experience because I live in a little box, and that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be like a lot of questions to ask, i.e., is it an American film that's being financed by Scandinavians?
Yes.
So it'll star American actors?
It will have a combination of American actors and a few
Well,
Scandinavian.
then, I mean, to me, that sounds like the story is very specific to that. Then that it fits. Presumably, the story fits that world or that type of thing. And so, for me, if you're getting to make the film the right way, i.e., someone's not going and trying to turn a dark action movie into a silly comedy or something. You know what I mean? Like if it's the right film and someone wants to make it, I don't think you worry about anything else. I mean, that's the truth. At the end of the day, unless you're talking about you're making a $40 million film and you have to choose between the people in Scandinavia or Warner Brothers or something, that's different. But if it's going to be an independent film, you want to just get it made.
Yeah.
I mean, get it made at the end of the day. And if you're not having to compromise the vision and intention of the film. I'm making a film that's about a very important American historical event, and we're probably going to shoot it in Budapest because there's financiers there. Now, the cast doesn't have to be from the area. The crew does. But, I looked at it, and I said, well, as long as I'm not compromising, it all takes place in a soundstage. So it's just we're going there because they want to bring an American production there. So it depends on context, I think, with it, as opposed to it hurting chances later on or not. And also like amazing films get released very well. I mean, the best movie I've seen this year was The Hunt, and that was a Danish film.
Right.
And it got released here. So, it can happen. And there's also a whole market in Scandinavia that probably a lot of American independent films don't get to play at too. So
Right, that's a good point.
the scope might not be as big, but.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if all goes well, you're going to be taking that finished movie to a film festival.
Right.
At which point distributors would be looking to purchase films because that's what they do for film festivals, and film festivals are kind of the great equalizer. All that matters is that they're good. Nobody cares where the production budget came from. So marketing and all that other stuff, that's decisions to be made later. Right now, it's just all about getting the movie made.
I feel much better. I appreciate it.
Well, and the fact is, even if you make it with a studio, they're still going to preview it in front of an audience. If it doesn't work in front of the audience, they could bury it anyway. Studios do it all the time. So whether it's you're showing it to a festival audience or a Nielsen test screening, it's kind of the same deal. What you really want to do is just make sure you make a good film that connects with audiences.
I try.
Oh, would it be in English? Yeah, well, that's a big help too.
That makes sense.
I'm glad you were on The Price is Right, because this feels a little game showy, you know? Anyway, all right. This is kind of a tricky question, but because there are probably a few aspiring filmmakers and people on their way up in the audience, I think it would be very valuable to ask you each. And feel free to take it on an upbeat, downbeat, sideways, whatever you want. What was an obstacle that you've encountered thus far that you found to be a real stumbling block? And then how did you contend with it to get beyond it?
I have never encountered a stumbling block in my career.
Thank you very much. Good night.
It's just been easygoing. And my personal stumbling block is knowing when the script is done. That's my personal thing. I'm sure these guys are going to have much better stories and intricate, elaborate context, but my basic thing is it's done. It's done enough for someone else to read. That's my personal block that I challenge and sometimes I embrace, but yeah, short and sweet.
Wait, Philippe, how do you know? Like, it's not just at 120. Like, there must be some other indication.
It's actually, sometimes when I start getting the same notes back from different sources, it's like, okay, I should make that change. We're done. Or you don't get any notes back, which never happens, ever happens. How do you know? When the check clears?
Thank you.
The biggest stumbling block is financing. Independent financing, just really, it's almost non-existent in a lot of ways. And my first film did well, and it won awards and played festivals and all these things. And I thought that my second film, I got the rights to this David Sedaris story, and he'd never allowed the rights to his work before. So I thought, okay, I'm the first one to do this. He's like one of the most successful living authors. We got a really big TV actor to star in it. I couldn't even raise $250,000 for it because it was a dark comedy that was what people call execution dependent, which are my two favorite / least favorite words in combination. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, this is whenever a producer says that to me, I'm like, this relationship won't work out. Because of course it's execution dependent. What good film has never not been execution dependent? Having said that, it's financing. And so really, I couldn't, the film was written to be around like a $2 million film. And I reached across points where it was either I could make it, not make it at that budget range, or find a way to cut the budget down. And I answered the question of, can I cut the budget and still keep the integrity of what I wanted to make intact, and just barely did. And we had to pull a lot of tricks, and we made it for less than a quarter of what the original intended budget was, because there just wasn't, and that barely even happened then. We just skated by on it, and I think we were, and like you said, at film festivals, budgets don't matter. At the end of the day, we were the lowest budget film in competition this year at Sundance. But it doesn't make it any different than we weren't being held to any lesser or greater regard than any other films there. And so, but financing, my next film, it's just financing. Every day, that's all the conversations are about. It's like, where is the money going to come from? Is it going to be dependent on an actor or not? Is it going to be, who is it going to, how many different people is it going to be? How much creative say they're going to have? Financing is the only stumble block. I would have made 3-4 films by now, not just 2, if financing was available to me.
All right. Thank you, Kyle.
I totally agree with what they said. I think for me, the main obstacle is to focus on what I do and nothing else. Because you tend to think, at least I tend to start like analyzing the industry and see what works and what doesn't. And then you end up like, how do you say, like when a dog is chasing his tail? Okay. You end up doing that and you never get there. So what I think you should do is focus on what you want to do what you love, and hope that the world is going to love it as well. That's the only thing you can do. And then have a producer to handle the rest. And a friend.
And then okay, do what you love.
I'm not talking about.
And then go to Sony.
Yeah. But I mean,
I'm kidding.
That's what Sam Raimi did when he was 18 years old.
That's totally true. He's a great example of.
He directed the movie. Yeah. He had his friend Rob Tappert, who was 20 and had nothing, no money and no connection at all. I said, "You're going to handle the money. Get me whatever, $500. I know. Do whatever you got to do. And that was his job. And Sam kept committed to running the screenplay and do what he had to do. So for me, at least, the hard thing is trying not to think about things that are not the writing and the movie. But it's hard because you get into the internet and box office and see, this movie didn't work, this movie worked, why? And you start to try to find patterns, and then you go to a script and say, this shit is not going to work ever, no one's going to buy it because, and that's the wrong path, I think.
Very good.
Yeah, I guess my stumbling block has been finding the Rob Tappert that'll help out.
The wrong what?
Finding someone like Rob Tappert
yeah.
that Sam Raimi had. That's the trick, is finding someone that can do all that and support you, who shares the same vision. And I think a big part of being a director now is going and doing these presentations. And I think sometimes, it really helps to, really hone your presentation and go in and meet with producers and just really wow them in the room.
Is there a method of pitching? We don't have too much time left, so I'll probably be able to take one or two more. But is there a method of pitching or going into the room and saying, here's my portfolio, here's my conceptual art? Is there something that you find is the most valuable way to approach producers? And the deep pockets behind the producers?
I think it's situation dependent. I mean, it can be anything depending on what the situation calls for. There's definitely instances where you can over-prepare and you go in with a huge presentation and for whatever reason it doesn't work. I mean, I've stumbled through pitches that I thought of on the car ride over and gotten jobs, and then I've sweated for a week coming up with something and not gotten jobs. And the thing for Paramount that I directed, I made a felt board, like a really, really lo-fi, like in Sunday school, where you'd put Jesus up on the thing. And because there are so many characters to keep track of, and it looked awful, but it got me the job, actually, weirdly. So it all depends. I mean, who was the guy that did Sky Captain: The World of Tomorrow?
That's Paramount also. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that was this amazing pitch that he did, essentially. Yeah, that's what I mean. But he made that short film over a course of a number of years, which worked. So, just as all, there's no one way to pitch. Just it depends on who you're pitching to and what the project is.
I only pitch on things that I've only pitched a few times, and it's been because if I don't love the script, I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to go in and just to try to get a job. And so there's been a couple of times, and I find it's like finding that middle ground. It's weird. It's like going on a first date. You don't want to seem too excited about it because then they'll be like, oh, it seems like he really needs it. So now we don't really want. It's a mind game, and it's so annoying. But I've only ever gone on things I really love. So I usually come in maybe a little over prepared because at the end of the day, I'd rather appear overzealous and really in love with it than blasé. Even if that means that'll lead to me not getting the job. I don't know. I would be bad at pretending to not be really enthusiastic or really in love with.
Let's explore this dating metaphor. This is interesting.
Yeah, it always is. I'm doing cast meetings now with actors before they audition, and it's like awkward speed dating all the time. I mean, it is. But a lot of it's just trying. But I have friends who've gotten jobs at big studios or big TV where they come in and they're like, oh, I don't know, I liked it, blah blah blah, and. Well, the one guy was English, so maybe the accent helped, and he was just he came in, he was like, I kind of liked it, and he got the job, and other people were bleeding for the job. So I think it's just what they're looking for, and you don't know, and you can't be accountable for that, so you can only go in as yourself.
Well, being special, being kind of unique, valuable from somewhere else, it's genuinely valuable, especially in casting actors. You see this in a lot of the Dramalog, advice notices and things like that. They say, tell them you're from Paris, and you're only here for 2 days. And you need to get on a plane, and you're leaving on Thursday or whatever it is, and they'll see you then. But if you say, yeah, I work at the Ivy, and then they're like, no, yeah, we'll catch you later, man. Even if it's the Ivy, it's still no. So yeah, you don't have to be from another land, but be unique. I think is a very important theme in all these things.
I didn't think I had anything to add, and now I definitely don't have anything to add. But that would have been it. That did work for me once. To do a pitch. I was like, yeah, I'm only going to be, I live here now. but I let them know through my representation I was only going to be in town for a couple of days, and I wound up getting that meeting just because they thought I was not going to be here.
Yeah, tighten that window and make them want you. I think that's important.
I think this last 5 or 6 months we've been pitching around all the time. So what I learned is that the people you're pitching to are really insecure about what they want. They don't know. They have to make movies because they have to keep the wheels turning, the machine going on, but they don't know what to do. And one very important thing is you, as a filmmaker, you have to be very, secure, confident of what you're doing, because that's what they're looking for. The moment you go like, yeah, it may work, it may not, like, man, you are on our same side. Like, we want someone that tells us what will work. And that's your job as a filmmaker. You tell the guys, like, trust me, this is going to work. That's a good thing. And the other thing is, and this is a very bad advice, but it's how it works. Unfortunately, movie business is a business, and they're going to spend money, and they expect to make money out of the movies. So if you have an amazing idea for a story, something you want to get it done, try to think of what's the best thing in the story, what could sell the story better. Like that's what it happened to me. Like I'm pitching a story and going through the characters, and I think they're great, and I'm sure they're not listening. And at some point, I say something that they think that could be in the trailer, and they go like, "Wow, I can sell that." Now you got their attention.
You mean like
iconic? Oh, the characters are great too, and whatever. But they found something that they can sell, and unfortunately, the business is all about that. How can you sell something? You get a short, very small window. People are gonna, see 30 seconds of a trailer. There's a lot of things. I mean, you go into YouTube and things pop up all the way. I mean, you have to be able to sell a movie in a very short frame. So if you go and pitch something and you give them that thing that they could sell, they're gonna get it. That's what I think. I'm totally sure that if you give them something that they can sell, they're gonna buy it. The rest you can work in development. You can build better characters and whatever, but that thing that they think they could sell, that's important. But that's a bad advice.
I think that's good advice.
Sounds like good advice.
I think it's good. Well, one of the things is there's so many shows out there right now. Just having any little thing that makes yours stand out from the pack that will cut through all the other media madness. I think you want to focus on that aspect of your film when you're trying to pitch it. But yeah, I agree. They think they're insecure and they really want someone that'll just step in and tell them, how to make their show work. But ultimately, you're really selling yourself more than you're reassuring them that you're in charge and you're going to be a good leader. You're going to be like the general of the army, and they're in safe hands. And then that's sort of number one. And then if you convince them of that, then you can, And part of that is, they're like. Hopefully, you convince them that you're smarter than they are, and then that makes all your meetings way easier down the track too. As soon as they start thinking, "Hang on, maybe this guy doesn't know what he's talking about," that's when you're going to get into trouble.
Know what you're talking about. That could be a good theme.
Or at least convince them you know what you're talking about.
That's good. Okay, our time is up. So I am going to say if anyone has a really important question that they'd like to ask our panelists, we'll do one more, but we're at 3:30. So anybody? It's okay if you do. We can fit one more in. Yeah? Okay, one more.
Since we're at HollyShorts, and one of the reasons why I think this festival is amazing is because it's right here in Hollywood. How important has it been, and I recognize two panelists on there that I've met on a number of occasions living in Hollywood. How important is it to be here now, to be a filmmaker? And how much how important is it to collaborate? Because every project seems to take forever. Are you, do you find that you're looking for collaborative partners to kind of get out a lot of projects and kind of bounce off of their network and their abilities, et cetera, to do things? Or are you in your own box and kind of just trying to get your stuff done?
I think it's great to be here because you can just take the meetings and you can meet people in person. I think once you've met them, then you can Skype with them or whatever, but it's good to actually meet the people in person and get a feel for who they are. Having been in Australia, I before I even came out here, I had a number of phone calls with producers, and it's much harder to get a feel for what it'd be like to work for them just over the phone. So I think that's good. But I agree, if you're about to leave the country in a week, you'll have the meeting really quickly. And that actually happened to me, and I was going to do a movie, and they flew me out from Australia first class and put me up in a hotel and stuff, and just because I wasn't around, that was really cool. That's the only time I've flown first class. I think it was awesome. But that said, they might really be busy for that week, and then, can you come in on Monday? And it's like, oh, no, I'll be gone. Oh, well, that's too bad. Because that'll happen too. So, what was the other part of your question?
And then the collaboration, the how important is it? Are you open to like collaborating with people to get projects done and visions done in different aspects? Or are you in your own kind of just trying to get it done yourself?
Well, it depends on if you've come up with the idea yourself and it's something you're pitching, or if you're stepping into something that's already underway. I guess as a director that's made films, my agents are always sending out to things that are kind of set up already, and so you want to step in and have a feel for what stage of development it's at. I looked at one film and they'd already done all this tons and tons of artwork, and I'm not going to say, oh, that's terrible, we should start from scratch. You go, oh, no, that's great, I love the artwork. And it's a negotiation. You try and tune into what they've already got in mind, and you try and get a feel for how they see the film, and then look at the ways you can plus it up. But in a way, it's a safe zone, because a lot of times I'll go for stuff and I kind of like it, but I think maybe if we do this, it'd be really cool, and I'd really like to do it if we could change it like that. And if they don't want to change it like that, then I'm happy. I don't want to make that other film anyway. And I've actually had meetings like that on some films, and they ended up going the other way, and the film came out, and it was terrible. And so I didn't feel, at one point you sort of feel bad when you see all the ads and you go, oh, maybe I should have pushed harder for that film. And then it comes out and it wasn't very good anyway. So then you feel, okay, well, but then there's other films, like I remember I read the script for Drive, and I just didn't get it. And when I saw the film, I thought, oh wow, that's great. If his style, that's great. It would have been terrible if I'd made that movie, because my heart wouldn't have been in it. So you don't feel bad about missing out on those films, or
I think filmmaking is a teamwork, and you have to collaborate always. And I heard a lot of producers, when they ask him about a director, the first thing they say is like, yeah, he listens. He knows how to work with the team before talking about his talent. And there's a lot of amazing directors that made awesome movies that are not working anymore. Like Terry Gilliam, for me, is like the best. Well, in the last 30 years, he's amazing. But he's not. Nobody wants to work with him because he's crazy. He does whatever he want to do, never listens. So no one wants to give him money. So I think that it's a virtue. It's a very important talent to have as a director and a writer or producer or whatever, to know how to work in a team. Very important.
If Stanley Kubrick made a film, it was a Stanley Kubrick film, but he had made not that many films really because of that reason. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah, you can kind of earn the right to not be collaborative once you're really talented and successful, but otherwise, yeah. I mean, like you said, filmmaking is a collaborative art. I mean, the only way that you can do it, so you're always looking for somebody who can make you better. But as far as living here, like we were all saying earlier, there's so many obstacles. There's always people ready and willing to tell you no. It seems like that would be one more way that they could tell you no. So for me, it was just as far as staying here and not moving away. I mean, once you've established some degree of success, I suppose, like you said, you can always Skype in or you can come for trips, but it feels like it's limiting the opportunities. that may come around. So despite the traffic and the awfulness of a lot of the city, it's still ground zero. Even New York is tough. I mean, even I worked with directors that live in New York and have to continually be coming back here to LA.
Yeah, I mean, I think living in LA, I just think you raise the chances of, like, I'm working with a casting director now on my film, and I met her at a party that it was at a friend's house. She doesn't even work in the industry. And we started talking, and I was like, oh, you're a casting director? She's like, yeah, I just did Spectacular Now. And I was like, oh, I'm casting a movie that's all high school-aged boys. She's like, I worked on that movie for 3 years and saw every single high school-aged boy in town. It was and now she's working on my film. And I just think that happens to me so many times. I met my manager at a holiday party. It's one of those things where you're in a city that is fueled by this industry, and so you're surrounded by it. And I'm not making films in the system, so I'm not saying, like, oh, you need to be. I just think you're surrounding by people who could be collaborators. I believe film is collaborative through and through and through. And I don't like taking ownership, even though I have ended up writing, directing, producing, and editing my films. I've only done that out of necessity, not out of lack of collaboration, only out of financial necessity. And on top of that, I never, ever, ever want the credit that says the film is by me. I think that's like the worst. That always upsets me a lot. I don't judge it, but it sounds like I do. But when someone says a film by, I'm like, really, a film by? Like, what about the other 400 people it might have taken to make it? But having said that, there's also collaboration can also be evil and poisonous in a way, in that there are a lot of people. For instance, when I had my script for the Sedaris project, it basically took 3 years of wading through producers who wanted me to sign over creative control, who wanted me to sign contracts that said they were allowed to give notes to actors. I mean, absurd things where I'd go really far down the line with a financier, and then they'd want me to sign something that says that they were allowed to, go in between takes and give notes to actors. And I was like, why would I ever sign this and let you do that? And they were like, we can't make this movie together. And I'd be like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. So there's a lot of people that are looking to take advantage of material if it's good. So I think it's about being open to collaboration and collaborators, but also protecting yourself. Because we are in a city of collaboration, there are people who know and have become very good at training themselves on how to take advantage of others through that desire to work together.
As far as living here in the community, obviously it's 2013. We all know you can make a movie or start a project anywhere, like literally anywhere. Budapest, New Orleans, the list goes on and on and on. But I always say this jokingly. I'm from New York, obviously, but I always make this statement jokingly. I say, well, it was either LA or India if I wanted to be in the movie business. And I wound up in LA, and that wasn't even it was a conscious decision. Directing music videos brought me out here, but I can't say if I wasn't out here, I probably wouldn't have sold the first movie, although it's a movie about New York. It had to get sold here, shot in New Orleans, and faked for New York. And all my New Yorker friends, will never let me hear the end of it, because everyone from home knows that you're not looking at home when you look at it, but that's a whole different thing. Yeah, obviously, exactly like he said, you could be anywhere and meet someone. And early on, there was something else I used to say, and only people in the industry really got it, and that was being in LA is like just being in a big, giant office building, because you could be online at coffee, and everyone around you or someone around you is talking about something that may not relate to you directly, but in a way it does, because it's all in the business. So yes, living in the community is obviously important. And I don't remember the second part of the question.
The collaborative part.
Oh, collaboration. Yeah, that's a tough one, because I don't have a writing partner. Sometimes I wish I did, like right now, and I'd have a clever anecdote to tell you, but I don't. So, but I think I'm open to it. I think it's probably a good thing as far as giving your work over to someone to read and then getting notes back. I'm sure it's probably easier or better to give it to your partner, who already has an idea of how your brain works and so forth and so on. So I guess maybe being a collaborator from the very, very beginning is an important thing, but obviously when you're on set and all the steps to get there, 1 million people are involved. 1 million people, indeed.
I think in the end, it's a movie. You have to collaborate. You can't do everything yourself. what you want to do is just surround yourself with really talented people. You know, get the really good costume person, the really good art production designer. You know, just surround yourself by great people, and then it's a real joy collaborating.
Thank you. And all of you live in LA now, right? Every one of you.
Okay. Philippe, Kyle, Jamie, Rodo, Peter, thank you all for coming. This is an excellent panel. Very, very illuminating. Yeah? And thank you also to literally, sincerely, not just like a pitch, but like sincerely thank you all for coming to HollyShorts, because this really is a pretty fabulous festival.